Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dynasty Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with my usual co-host, Russell Clay. Say hello, Russ.
Aloha, everyone.
Russ, it's very early in the Dynasty offseason, but it feels like we've been doing this a while. A lot of players covered, and yet still many players to go. So I think this week you and I are going to tackle running backs, figuratively, not literally, because those guys would kill us. But first, let's do our usual news and notes section and update everyone on what's happened this week. You know, it's we were talking offline, not much, only because it's pre-free agency, it's pre-draft, but we will do our best to bring you the latest and figure out how that affects your dynasty team. So first up, Russ, I think probably the biggest story of this week, if we had to pick one, Matt Forte all but conceding that he will not be back in Chicago next year, which, you know, is going to be kind of sad, actually. Like, it's kind of the end of an era. I mean, Forte, I still remember when he was a rookie and he was, a very hot commodity then, and he's, proven his worth this entire time.
Yeah, he's been a strong fantasy contributor for a long time in that Chicago Bears jersey, and it's weird. It's weird to see all these careers come to an end as we get older. Pretty much guys not from our childhood, but teenage years and all this stuff. But I don't know. It'll be interesting what happens with him because it seems like he's still pretty intent on continuing his career. So it'll be interesting where he falls and what type of fantasy situation that leads for him,
Yeah. So let's get into that. There hasn't been a whole lot of dot connecting, at least yet. I mean, people are throwing teams out there, but I'm pretty sure every team that doesn't have a solid running back at this point is, theorizing they could sign Matt Forte. So in your opinion, Russ, just a completely wild guess, what would be a, if not the best fit, then a good fit for Forte, at least from his fantasy production?
I'm looking at a few situations where I just don't like the running back. I'm looking at like the Redskins, even though it wouldn't necessarily be the best fantasy situation. I don't think Matt Jones has really done much of anything to sort of signify that he's the future there. I know there are some indicators that maybe he's an interesting player that they like for the future, but I'm not sold on that, them being done there and not addressing that situation. So that might be a spot. I mean, it's tough to say right now,
Yeah, I know some people have said New England, which I don't really understand. I mean, they re-signed Dion Lewis, and honestly, why would they sign Matt Forte after Lewis? I mean, Lewis is coming back, so it's not like there's any doubt about that. I'm in the Metroplex for Dallas-Fort Worth, and even here they're saying, hey, maybe Matt Forte, which I don't know. I don't really see that as Jerry's style because they've got McFadden who, even though none of us want to admit it, did a serviceable job last year. And look, I would think if Jerry Jones is going to sign a running back, he's going to go all in and trade for a Peterson or something like that. So
I guess it's just tough to decide what type of player he is now. Does he have another year of feature back ability left? Because if not, I think Houston would be an interesting situation if Arian Foster sort of has trouble coming back or they're not confident he can sort of carry the full load anymore. So you're looking for teams like that, but it's really up in the air right now. I do think he has some ability left, though.
Well, I don't know, man. I may disagree with you as much as I don't want to. He is 30 years old, Russ, and as you and I both know, he might as well be a corpse as far as running backs in the NFL go. Not that he hasn't defied time. He really has. I mean, even last year, he still had 1,200 rushing yards and almost 500 receiving yards. So he's still productive. I guess my concern is the longer you have him, and especially in dynasty leagues, it's like you're tempting fate almost.
Yes.
Believe me, I don't want him to go. I have plenty of Matt Forte shares, but at some point the legs are going to fall off, and it's going to be done. And I guess that's my concern. Like, I completely understand the Bears wanting to move on from a personnel standpoint. Now, that's not to say Jeremy Langford is good, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I understand it, that they don't want to pay a 30-year-old running back anything more than the minimum.
We see it a lot more in baseball, where players get that huge contract at 30, and then by 33, I mean, you're the baseball guy, but right? Doesn't that happen a ton where the guy's like 33 and then he's like done?
Well, yeah, only because the baseball free agency rules are so archaic. But I will say also, baseball teams are getting a little wiser. Like, for example, you probably remember Zach Greinke being signed this offseason, which, as a Dodger fan, hurt. But the big hang-up was that 6th year, because Greinke, I think, would have been 37, 38, something like that. So they didn't want to go the 6th year. So the point is, baseball teams, I think, are finally catching up to what football teams have known for a couple years, which is, look, these guys – I don't want to say easily replaceable, but with the salary cap and all the other considerations, running back is definitely a lot easier to find someone else. I'm not going to go. I don't want to say replace and Matt Forte in the same sentence, because that just sounds wrong. But you get my drift. So, and I'm with you. I think that's an excellent point, though. On, hey, you have to determine, both as an NFL team and your dynasty team, what is Matt Forte now? Is he still the feature back? I mean, I think if you're rolling with Forte as your feature back on your dynasty team or even your NFL team, that's a risk. But as you said, if he's a complimentary player, which, again, it remains to be seen if he'll sign up for something like that, I think he could be really good. And in that case, I think we'd agree that opens up the pool of teams that could potentially sign him to damn near every team out there. I don't know of any team that wouldn't want Matt Forte as sort of your passing down back, or even your spell guy to your main guy.
And I look at what Fred Jackson did in Buffalo for quite a few years there, where he wasn't the main guy. They didn't give him 300 carries a year or anything, but he was that receiving down back. He did get a few carries here and there, and he could sort of carry the load for a game or two if injuries hit the running back position. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for there. In Dynasty, if he goes to a good spot, he'll probably be going a little too high for me to feel comfortable. Like you mentioned, he is over 30 now. But I do think there's some redraft sort of tread left.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Only because there's just not that many running backs out there that that we know can produce. If we had to pick teams, I mean, I don't know. I think he could do that complimentary role in Baltimore pretty well. I mean, they got Justin Forsett that'll come back, who I definitely think they don't want to roll the dice with him as their 3-down guy. And look, he could be the 1st and 2nd down guy, and Forte could be the 3rd down guy, something like that. But I'm with you. I think it's all coming down to what he is and what you think he is. So, all right. So the other side of that coin, Russ. So Jeremy Langford, he's the incumbent now. He's the apparent starter. Now, again, it's pre-free agency, pre-draft, so it's very possible the Bears draft or sign somebody else. But at the moment, that's Jeremy Langford's job to lose. So yay or nay on Jeremy Langford in Dynasty, Russ?
It's a nay for me. I think the difference between him and Melvin Gordon last year is not as big as people think in terms of rushing ability, which is not
brutal, Russ.
That's
not the hot takes are starting early.
That's not where you want to be. And Mike Clay came out with an awesome article today talking about sort of how running backs did against certain formations and how many cornerbacks were in and sort of like secondary players were in on the rushing plays. And there were a lot of negative indicators for both Matt Jones and Jeremy Langford. And I wasn't really that impressed with what I saw from him either way. He did have that big game against the Rams where he had like 100 yards receiving. And he did score quite a few touchdowns. So, I mean, it's not all bad, but I'm just not buying this hype. It wasn't like he did what Thomas Rawls did or anything like that. It was actually really mediocre production, sort of, with touchdowns that made it look a lot better from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and I think to your point, he's definitely a complimentary guy. He's certainly not a three
Yeah.
down guy, and I think that is a very good indicator, letting Forte go, that they're probably going to either sign someone or draft someone to
Mhm.
go with Langford. I mean, I think it would be a stunner if Langford entered the season as the primary, three down back in Chicago. So I'm with you, Russ. I'm not sold on Langford yet. I mean, his value could be inflated between now and stuff like the draft or free agency just because he's the lead dog there now. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I'm banking on that when the season starts.
We see it every year where a guy looks like the leader in the clubhouse before free agency and the draft, and
Oh,
then
Kiri Robinson, hello.
and then sort of free agency happens, the draft happens, and then they pick up one or two other guys, and he's the odd man out. So we see it every year. I like you said, I do think Langford is at least a complimentary piece, but to draft him as like even a running back 2 or running back 3 right now is way too much for me.
Yeah, I would strongly advise people to sell while you can and get some value for that pick.
Yeah.
All right, Russ. So let's move on to hopefully a happier story. Josh Gordon. The rumors are he will be reinstated. And look, let's face it, he has not been in the news in about a year. He has not gotten in trouble, so things are looking up. I don't know. On a scale of 1 to 10, Russ, how excited are you for the reemergence of Josh Gordon?
I'm pretty excited, but it looks like the hype train is going to get out in front of me here. And much like last time, I'm not going to own any shares again, but I'm really excited about this. I mean, clearly displayed elite ability a few years ago, and I mean, he's still very young, so there's still a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and look, he did. For comparison, he had about the same stats as DeAndre Hopkins did, both with Brian Hoyer at quarterback. By the way, that's the common thread there.
Oh,
So there's some comps for you, but I'm with you. Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, look, I'm not going to say the Browns are going to get better this offseason because who knows really, but the chances are high they draft a quarterback with that second pick. Gary Barnidge, as we know, came on very strong last year. Yeah, I think, and look, they got Hugh Jackson, which I think is the first coach the Browns have had, at least heading into their tenure, that a lot of people felt good about. So, yeah, man, I think things are looking up. I think, wide receiver 1 is probably the ceiling on that. I mean, I don't know that he's going to have quite the same dominant season as he had before, but who knows? I mean, it's definitely possible. It's obviously possible. He already did it. And
yeah.
like you said, he's still young enough to where he could have a couple more seasons like that.
Hugh Jackson is a very good coach. I have a lot of respect for what he's done, sort of, even in Oakland, and especially in Cincinnati the last few years. So, yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think okay, so let's play this game then, Russ. How should you treat Josh Gordon if, say, you're targeting him in a trade? Like, what do you think it's going to take to snag him? I mean, first-round rookie pick, 2 first-round rookie picks, and a running back. Like, what's your combo that it would take for you to part with him?
For me, I would probably pay like 1.3 to 1.5 right now, but I know that's not going to do it. He's kind of shooting up there in value, so I think it would honestly take like a high rookie pick, like one of those first 2 rookie picks to actually get an owner to trade him right now. So that's tough. I think I saw him go 25 overall in a startup the other day. That's too high for me. I couldn't do that, but
that is a hot take. I mean, good for that person. But.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I am optimistic about him next year. I think he'd be a good bet for 1,000 yards if he does get reinstated, which, I mean, I don't even know if that's 100% yet.
Yeah, well, it's not confirmed, but again, the signs are pointing that way. Look, you gave us a reason to talk Josh Gordon, so I'm going to let it go. All right, Russ. So very good. That's news and notes for this week. Let's move on now to some more rookie dynasty talk, Russ. You and John Moore, my brother from another mother, last week covered the wide receivers very extensively. and very comprehensively. So hopefully all of you listening will draft those guys and win your leagues this year. But for this week, we are moving on to the running backs. I don't know, Russ, would you agree not nearly as much depth at running backs this year as receivers?
No, not really. I mean, there's some interesting pieces in the later rounds, but there's a lot more complementary players you see sort of fitting into those secondary roles or committee roles. I mean, I was really high on a lot of players last year, but there's the changing of the guard in terms of coaching now, where you find a lot of these teams want to use specialists. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're complementary pieces. I mean, you look at a Danny Woodhead, who is really one-sided in terms of where he gets his usage, but it can work, you know? So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of complementary pieces like that, but still interesting nonetheless. Not as strong as last year, not as strong as the year before. It's kind of I'm not too high on it, but there is some interesting players.
All right. So with that said, Russ, let's dig in. We'll do like maybe top 5 or so, and then we'll get to some sleepers and get to some overrated guys. All right. So first up, and I think you and I both agree, the top tier is probably Elliot, probably Henry. What order are you taking those guys, and how far apart are they from each other?
Yeah, Zeke Elliott is really the prize of this rookie draft for me. I mean, I know a lot of people like Treadwell, but if you listened last week, you'll know I'm probably not quite as high on him as most. I see Zeke Elliott fairly similarly to the way I looked at Todd Gurley last year, which is an elite running back prospect. And obviously based on the running back dynasty way of life that is now, that's a welcomed sight. So
like a unicorn.
I think by next year, if all things go well and he stays healthy, I could see him being drafted where Todd Gurley is now. So he's my 1-1 for rookie drafts this year. So I have him much higher than everyone.
So 1-1 overall. He's your top rookie on the board. Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think he should really blow up the combine too. So that'll be interesting to watch as well.
Well, and that would probably just put his stock on overdrive at that point, because I think he's probably, even entering the offseason was probably ahead of Henry.
Right.
And yeah, like you said, if he confirms that with a good combine, then I think there's no contest who the first running back's taken who's going to be. So and just on a personal note, I watched that Oregon-Ohio State national championship from 2 years ago. I mean, it was just a bloodbath with Elliot. I mean, given not to say the Oregon run defense was, stellar, but look, they had some first-round picks on that defense, and he just ran over them. I mean, it was just they couldn't stop him. I think he had 7 yards of carry that game. So
and that was, like you said, that was a field of just premium college athletes. It wasn't a 1 AA school or anything.
Yeah, he wasn't like playing Akron or Youngstown State. So exactly. I'm with you. So okay, so you said he's your top rookie overall. Let's just put it in perspective. Dynasty startup, where are you putting him?
I would take him in the late second round of a dynasty startup. I don't think you're going to have to do that right away if you're doing a startup or something like that. But, I mean, you should definitely be looking at him in the third round if rookies are included in the startup.
And you said you compared him a little bit to Gurley. I think Gurley's still ahead for you, right? At least at the same stage as Gurley was last year. Gurley's still ahead then of Elliot, correct?
Yes. Okay. He is ahead, but not by much. They're actually relatively similar.
Okay.
Not in terms of playing style, but overall talent. Yeah.
Sure. So that would mean Elliot is far and away ahead of every other running back from last year, in addition to this year. Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. So number 2 is Derrick Henry. The consensus is this a slam dunk too?
He's pretty much a slam dunk for me. He's a physical specimen, obviously Heisman winner and extremely productive in his junior year. And in terms of touches, he got a lot of touches last year, but before that, they really didn't use him that much. So for people that are worried about usage, that's not really a concern either. There's been a lot of debate on sort of what type of player he is, and is he sort of quick enough and strong enough to translate these skills to the next level? And I think he isn't the same skill level as a Le'Veon Bell, but I could see similar usage where he is a bigger back, but his best asset is being used in space. So, when you see a Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh and they dump it off to him in the screen pass, when he gets to that secondary, all those corners and safeties don't really have a good shot to tackle him. So that's kind of what I see with Henry. Once he gets that steam built up, even NFL corners won't really have a good chance against his size-speed combination. In terms of running, I see him. I mean, the Brandon Jacobs comparison has been made. I think he's more athletic than that. But in terms of pure running between the tackles, that's an okay comp for me.
So his size, maybe being a negative, doesn't worry you at all, him getting too big?
It is a concern. I won't say
he's a big boy, Russ. He's a big boy. And
we've seen with big backs in the past. I mean, when you take too many shots to the knees as a running back, that's never good. So he's definitely got to learn how to avoid those big hits to his lower body. But I like him to translate well into the NFL.
All right, so rookie draft, Russ, where are you putting him? I mean, obviously behind Elliot, probably behind Treadwell, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So number 3, number 4, where's he going for you?
He'll be going 1-3 to 1-5 for me, depending on where he goes, unless he really drops in the draft, which I don't expect. I see him being a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, but he's pretty much locked into at least at the very worst 1-5 for me.
Okay.
So Corey Coleman, I like more than him pretty much no matter what. But after that, I see him in that range.
Yeah, and I think in a couple weeks, once things are sort of solidified, you and I can do our first rookie mock of the Dynasty offseason, where we can finally put our money where our mouth is, Russ. But all right, so we've got Elliot, we've got Henry. Those are the two obvious ones. So let's get into the next couple of guys on your draft board, Russ. Who do you got?
Yeah, so and in terms of this year, because Zeke Elliott is in this class, it really props it up. But after those two, I mean, so everyone has their favorites, but I think this is a little weaker than most years in terms of depth. Paul Perkins is my number 3 running back right now. He's a junior, early entry out of UCLA. 5'11", 210. He's been very productive the last 2 years, a very shifty back. I see him being sort of an all-purpose type player, not necessarily ever getting to that 275 carry role, but maybe he'll end up with 225 and like 50 receptions, like that type of usage. That's kind of what I see at his ceiling. He's probably a late 2nd, early 3rd round real NFL draft pick. So, I mean, we've seen players emerge from that type of range before, but I don't necessarily see him as a feature back either. But yeah, he is a strong player for my number 3.
So in rookie drafts, rookie dynasty drafts, where are you putting him? I mean, is there just that many more receivers ahead of him that you would take? Yeah. It seems like there probably is this year.
I honestly wouldn't look at him until the early 2nd round of a rookie pick or a rookie draft. So that's, I guess I'd probably take 10 or 12 receivers over him right now, which is.
Well, that makes sense, though, only because that's essentially how it was last year. You had Gordon and you had Gurley, who were, without a doubt. Well, I shouldn't say it wasn't like last year. Last year you had guys like Yeldon. You had guys like Abdullah who really shot up the draft board. So, and I guess it's possible that, there's some guys in this list that fall into really good situations like Abdullah did or like Yeldon did. But, I think at this point, I think I'm with you. It's kind of slim pickings after the first two.
And if you're trying to evaluate running backs for yourself, the production isn't nearly as predictive as receivers are. I think there's a lot more things you can sort of whip up for receiver metrics and stuff like that. Running backs is you got to find the right fit. They got to be drafted to the right spot. And I mean, combine metrics are pretty important for running backs. So like Carlos Williams last year was a guy who was pretty much not really on the radar, and then he blew up in the combine, and now obviously you see he had some decent rookie success. But it's a lot of things like that. Who are the physical freaks at the running back position? Obviously, there's nuances to the game. I really, again, I like Paul Perkins. He's not a physical freak, but he has some of the nicer nuances to his game. But it depends on where these guys go.
Sure. All right, so let's round out your top 5, Russ. Who do you got next?
So I'm looking at CJ Prosise from Notre Dame. He was kind of a one-year wonder, 6 foot 220, and he's one of those guys similar to Carlos Williams last year, where the production and consistency wasn't necessarily there, but I could see him absolutely blowing up the combine, running a low 4.5 or high 4.4 at 220 pounds. Like I could definitely see that in his range of outcomes. So, I mean, he was really productive per touch this year and sort of subbed in and became the feature back for quite a few games for Notre Dame. So I think he's an interesting player. And my number 5 is Wendell Smallwood. He's not really on many radars right now. He's 5'11", 200. He broke out this year, so he's definitely under the radar right now. But I see him as one of the more talented players in this draft, and it's depending on where he goes, he's going to stick in my top 5, which is kind of a hot take right now because pretty much consensus is Alex Collins and Kenneth Dixon over him.
Well, it's a hot take, Russ, and you all heard it here first. And look, you can't go wrong with a name like that, Wendell Smallwood. I love it. So, all right, so that's your top 5, Russ. So let's get into the fun part, the sleepers, who maybe aren't on yours or anyone's top 5 right now, but maybe you should start thinking about.
Yeah, so there's 2 players I really have in mind right now that I'm keeping an eye on. One is DeAndre Washington. He's really flying under the radar right now. He's 5'8", 200, and he really broke out the last 2 years. 1,492 rushing yards this year, 14 touchdowns for Texas Tech. He also added a nice receiving element to his game this year. I think it's always fair to question Texas Tech players and sort of what their production really means in that sort of offense. But based on a few of the games I watched, it was real production. It wasn't just some fluky dump off that nobody was around him. So I do think that was some real production, and I think he's a nice real player. So he could be a guy that sort of goes in the later rounds of rookie drafts that could bring solid returns. And then my little man prospect of the year is Tyler Ervin. He wasn't on my radar until the Senior Bowl recently. This year he's listed at 177 pounds during the college season. And so when you see that for a running back, you kind of just cross them off because there really aren't any success stories of 177-pound running backs.
That would be like me being a running back, Russ.
Yeah.
Not going to work.
You know what? We might throw you out there, but
yeah, the class is so weak this year. I could have a shot at the comp.
But
why not?
He's from San Jose State. He's from a small school, so I mean, he had 1,600 rushing yards this year. He was the bell cow for that team. He was the feature back. He was their do-all everything player. And I look at him as a speed guy. I could see him. There's a possibility here that he could run in the 4.3s at the combine. And if he does that, I mean, and even if he doesn't, even if it's in the low 4.4s, he weighed in at the Senior Bowl at 192. So 15 pounds heavier than what he was listed at in college. I mean, that's a pretty unreal weight change. So if that can hold up at the combine as well, I really like his skills for that weight.
All right, Russ. So the flip side of that, for every sleeper, there is an overrated guy. So who are your overrated guys that people should avoid on their rookie drafts?
Yeah,
You don't have to
it's
be so
hard.
depressed about it, Russ. I understand. You don't want to be the bad guy, but you have to.
I got to be the
You
bad
have
guy,
to.
man. All right, Devontae Booker, I'm out.
Oh no. Oh no. Already. No. No, I'm just
Devontae Booker out of Utah. He really only played 2 seasons of high-end college football. And I mean, he played well the last 2 years, but he was kind of screwing around in junior college for a while there. He's a little older than everyone in this draft class. And I wasn't impressed when I watched him. Like, his production, I just wasn't quite – it just didn't do it for me compared to a lot of other guys in this class. And I think he's going – in the top sort of 3 to 5. Like, as I mentioned earlier, it's a really open class after those top 2. So I'm seeing him sort of inch into that running back 3 to running back 5 range, and that's just not a place I'm comfortable taking him. As a complimentary guy, sure, but I wouldn't be willing to take even an early second-round rookie pick on him right now.
Well, and to your point, Russ, he's going to be 24 entering the season next year. The 2016 season for a rookie running back, 24. I mean, look, Todd Gurley's going to have 3 seasons under his belt before that,
Right.
And just like you said, unless he's a surefire workhorse that is going to get production early, I don't know, man. I can't justify taking any rookie running back who's that old, as a complimentary pick. I just can't do it. Like, you're picking running backs at that stage, they're lottery tickets, more or less, right? You're hoping to hit a home run on some of these guys, and especially for Dynasty, having a 24-year-old running back would be, I don't know, man. I'm not going to say it would be a waste, but it just feels like you could get other running backs in this draft that are probably 21, 22 and buy yourself a couple years.
And like John was talking about last week, age isn't like as much of a factor if you're a physical freak and you had great college production and you add all these other factors in. But he's not a physical freak. He had okay production. So these sort of add up into kind of an all right prospect. He's all right.
Yeah.
He's all right.
Yeah, right. Well, and I'm with you. I think he'll be a decent complimentary guy, a complimentary back in somebody's backfield. But yeah, I think there's probably at least a half dozen guys you would rather have just strictly on the age thing over him. It's not, as you said, he's not far and away better than some of these other prospects. So why get a guy that's 2 years older than any of these other guys?
Exactly. And all these guys are amazing. Like, that's the point. They're all good.
Well, look, they're better than you and I, Russ. Yeah.
But they're all NFL players, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be fantasy contributors.
Right. All right, Russ. Well, good. We covered a lot of running backs for everyone. So if you're having your way too early rookie dynasty draft, you were probably prepared by now for the running back position. And what's the lesson, Russ? Don't take one too early.
Yes.
Just wait. If you can't get an Elliot, you can't get a Henry, just draft a receiver, any receiver, really. So. All right, Russ. Well, you and I will look at some other positions next week. But until then, we thank you all for joining, and we will see you next time on the Dynasty Slant.